There is a moment adult children rarely admit out loud, not because it is dramatic, but because it is painfully ordinary. You are sitting in your car with the engine off, or standing in your kitchen with your phone in your hand, watching a familiar name light up the screen. Your thumb hovers, your chest tightens, and before you can form a single coherent thought, your body offers an answer you did not plan to give. Not today. Not again. From the outside, it can look like coldness, like you are choosing silence out of pride or punishment. Inside, it feels closer to triage. You are not trying to win an argument. You are trying to stop your nervous system from living on high alert, because for a long time, contact did not mean comfort. It meant a slow leak of energy, a steady drip of criticism disguised as concern, questions that were really inspections, love that arrived with strings attached. You kept telling yourself it was normal. You kept translating their tone into something kinder so you could keep the relationship alive. Then one day, the math becomes impossible to ignore. You realize you cannot keep explaining your pain to people who treat your boundaries like betrayal. And the decision to go no contact does not arrive as a sudden rebellion. It arrives as a quiet recognition. If you walk through that door again, you will lose yourself. And it rarely begins with one catastrophic event. More often, it is the accumulation of moments that are small enough to dismiss, yet sharp enough to leave a mark. A comment that sounds like a joke but lands like a verdict. A concern that is really a correction. A question that is framed as interest but functions like surveillance. Each interaction, by itself, is easy to rationalize. You tell yourself they mean well. You tell yourself you are being dramatic. You tell yourself this is just how families talk. But the mind is not only listening to words. The nervous system is tracking patterns, and it keeps score in a language most people do not notice until the bill comes due. This is what people mean when they describe it as the death by 1,000 cuts. It is not one betrayal. It is the steady drip of invalidation that teaches you your reality will always be negotiated. It is the boundary you set that gets treated as disrespect. It is the privacy you ask for that becomes a threat. It is the way your choices are treated like an inconvenience they must manage, as if your adulthood is something they can approve or reject. It is the constant pressure to explain yourself, defend yourself, soften your tone, and translate your needs into something they can tolerate. Over time, you stop bringing your full self into the room because you have learned what happens when you do. You get minimized. You get pathologized. You get pulled back into the role that keeps them comfortable. Psychologically, repeated micro-violations do something powerful. They turn closeness into anticipation. You begin scanning for the next critique, the next guilt trip, the next sudden shift in warmth. Even when nothing is happening, your body is preparing, jaw tight, breath shallow, shoulders raised, because it has learned that contact comes with a cost. And when people say, "But it's not that bad," they are measuring intensity instead of repetition. A single paper cut is minor. 1,000 paper cuts changes how you move through the day. Eventually, the relationship stops feeling like connection and starts feeling like chronic exposure. The distance does not start as a statement. It starts as a conclusion. Your nervous system reaches after collecting enough evidence. If I keep showing up, I keep bleeding. And in many families, that bleeding is not accidental. It is built into the structure. This is where enmeshment comes in, a form of closeness that looks loving from the outside but feels suffocating from the inside. In an enmeshed family, individuality is not treated as a normal developmental stage. It is treated as a problem to be corrected. Your thoughts are not simply yours. Your choices are not simply choices. They are interpreted as reflections of the parent's worth, status, or control. So when you grow, they do not experience it as growth. They experience it as loss. That is why love in these systems often arrives with a hidden contract. You can be close as long as you stay understandable. You can be supported as long as you stay compliant. You can be accepted as long as you do not separate. The child learns early that belonging is conditional, and the condition is loyalty that looks like access. The parent expects to know everything, to be consulted about everything, to be emotionally centered in everything. Privacy becomes secrecy. Differentiation becomes disrespect. A boundary becomes an accusation. Psychologically, enmeshment blurs the line between attachment and control. It teaches you to monitor the parent's emotional state as if it were your responsibility. You learn that their disappointment is dangerous, their sadness is your fault, their anger is something you must prevent. Over time, you stop asking the question every healthy adult should be able to ask, "What do I want?" Instead, you ask, "What will keep the peace? What will keep them calm? What will keep me from being punished with silence, guilt, or disapproval?" So when an adult child finally tries to individuate, the system reacts as if it is under attack. The family does not say, "I miss you." It says, "You have changed." It does not say, "I want to understand." It says, "Who put this in your head?" Because in an enmeshed dynamic, separation is not neutral. It is framed as betrayal. And that is the trap. The very act of becoming yourself is treated like a wound you inflicted, which is why distance can become the first place you are finally allowed to exist. And this is the part outsiders almost never see. Most adult children who go no contact did not start there. They tried everything that a reasonable person tries when they still believe repair is possible. They brought it up gently. They brought it up clearly. They chose calm moments and careful words. They tried to name patterns without blaming. They wrote long messages they rewrote 10 times, hoping the right phrasing would finally make them understandable. Some asked for family therapy. Some went to therapy alone first, thinking, "If I can just get healthier, I will stop reacting and we can be close again." Others offered concrete requests that should have been simple in any emotionally mature relationship. "Please do not comment on my body. Please stop showing up unannounced. Please do not use money as leverage. Please speak to me with respect even when you disagree." And sometimes it worked, briefly. There would be a softer week, an apology that sounded promising, a moment of warmth that reignited hope. The nervous system would unclench just enough to believe, maybe this time. But then the old dynamic returned, almost predictably. The same minimizing, the same defensiveness, the same guilt, now wrapped in a new sentence. "You are too sensitive. You are remembering it wrong. I guess I am just the worst parent then." In psychology, repair is not a single conversation. It is a sustained capacity to tolerate discomfort, take responsibility, and change behavior over time. Many families can do the first part, the words. They cannot do the second part, the follow-through. So the adult child keeps entering the cycle, not because they enjoy conflict, but because hope is an attachment instinct. Yet each loop costs more. Each attempt teaches the body that vulnerability will be met with distortion or punishment. Eventually, trying becomes the trigger. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally realized you cannot heal inside the environment that keeps reopening the wound. And even when the mind can finally name what is happening, the body does not let go easily. This is where trauma bonding keeps people trapped in relationships that hurt them, even when they can see the pattern with painful clarity. Trauma bonding is not about loving abuse. It is about how the nervous system attaches under conditions of inconsistency. When warmth and harm are braided together, the brain starts treating relief as proof of love. A good day feels like redemption. A kind text feels like evidence that the whole story was exaggerated. And because those moments are unpredictable, they become psychologically addictive. This is the same mechanism that makes intermittent reinforcement so powerful. When care arrives randomly, you work harder to earn it, because your system believes the next try might finally be the one that changes everything. For many adult children, this bond begins early. Love was not something you received freely. It was something you managed. You learn to read moods, anticipate triggers, adjust your personality, and become the version of yourself that kept the household stable. Over time, that survival strategy hardens into a false self. Not a fake personality in a dramatic sense, but a curated identity built around pleasing, soothing, and staying harmless. You become the child who does not need too much, who forgives quickly, who explains everyone's behavior away, who carries the emotional weight so the family can keep calling itself normal. And the cost is subtle at first. You lose your preferences. You lose your anger. You lose the ability to trust your own perception without checking it against their reaction. This is why leaving can feel impossible, even when staying is unbearable. No contact is not just the loss of parents. It is the loss of the role that once kept you safe. It is the grief of realizing that the closeness you fought for was conditional, and the terror of facing the question you avoided for years. Who am I if I stop performing? Shame enters here, too. You may feel weak for still wanting them, guilty for imagining distance, and terrified that you are the cruel one. But that fear is not proof you are wrong. It is often proof your system was trained to equate separation with danger. You did not stay because it was healthy. You stayed because the part of you that learned to survive in that house still believes leaving will cost you love, identity, and belonging all at once. And this is often the moment where people realize conversation is not failing because they are communicating poorly. It is failing because the other person cannot tolerate the psychological implication of what is being said. When an adult child sets a boundary in an emotionally immature or controlling family, it is rarely received as information. It is received as an accusation. It triggers shame. And shame is the emotion many parents will do almost anything to avoid. So instead of reflecting, they defend their identity. This is where DARVO shows up. Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. First comes the denial. That never happened. You are exaggerating. You are remembering it wrong. Then comes the attack. You are ungrateful. You are selfish. Therapy has made you disrespectful. And finally comes the reversal. After everything we did for you, you are doing this to us. Look at what you are putting us through. Suddenly the parent becomes the injured party, and the child becomes the aggressor, simply for naming reality. Psychologically, this is not just manipulation, it is also a defense strategy. If they admit the harm, they have to face guilt, responsibility, and the possibility that their version of themselves as a good parent is incomplete. For someone whose self-worth depends on being right, being needed, or being in control, accountability can feel like annihilation. So they rewrite the situation in real time, not to understand you, but to survive the threat to their ego. This is why communication becomes impossible. You are trying to talk about impact. They are trying to preserve identity. You are asking for change. They are fighting to avoid shame. And in that collision, the adult child learns a brutal lesson. Some conversations cannot create closeness because the other person experiences your boundaries as violence. And then comes the part that can feel the most maddening, especially when you have spent years trying to be clear. The parent tells other people, and sometimes tells themselves, I honestly have no idea why they cut me off. This is what psychologists and estrangement researchers often describe as the missing reasons. It is not simply that reasons are missing. It is that the reasons you gave are treated as if they never counted as reasons at all. You can write a letter, name specific incidents, explain the pattern, even bring a therapist into the conversation, and somehow the story that survives is still, they just disappeared. For some parents, this is strategic. If they admit what you said, they would have to take responsibility. But for many, it is also psychological distortion. The mind protects the self-image at all costs. If remembering accurately would create unbearable guilt or shame, the brain minimizes, reframes, or erases. It turns cruelty into discipline. It turns control into love. It turns boundary violations into overreacting. And when you finally pull away, it cannot integrate that you left because of harm, so it reaches for a safer narrative. You left because you are unstable, influenced, or ungrateful. Projection plays a role here too. They assign you motives that make sense inside their own fear. You want to punish, you want attention, you want revenge. That story feels coherent to them because it keeps them innocent. And this is why adult children eventually stop explaining. Not because they had no reasons, but because they finally understand that in some family systems, the truth is not unheard. It is unthinkable. And even with all of that, many people still do not leave. They stay for years, sometimes decades, because a specific kind of emotional fog settles over the relationship and makes distance feel morally impossible. In psychology, it is often described as fog, fear, obligation, and guilt. Fear is the oldest piece. Not just fear of being disowned, but fear of what happens inside your body when you disappoint them. The panic of an angry voicemail, the dread of being talked about, the terror of becoming the villain in the family story. Your nervous system learned early that their displeasure was dangerous. So even as an adult, conflict can feel like a threat to survival. Then comes obligation, the cultural script that turns endurance into virtue. They raised you. They sacrificed. Family is everything. You only get one mother, one father. Obligation sounds like gratitude, but it often functions like a leash. It teaches you that access to you is something they earned permanently, regardless of how they treat you now. And when you start to pull back, the obligation gets weaponized. You are told you are abandoning them, even if you are only trying to stop abandoning yourself. Finally, there is guilt, the most effective glue in toxic family systems. Guilt makes you confuse compassion with compliance. It makes you believe that if they are hurt, you must be wrong. It makes you rehearse excuses for their behavior until your own pain feels inappropriate. This is why no contact is so rare in its early stages. The problem is not that adult children do not see the harm. The problem is that leaving activates all three forces at once, and the body mistakes that activation for proof that the boundary is cruel. But fear is not the same as truth. Obligation is not the same as love. And guilt is not the same as responsibility. And when someone finally goes no contact, the first thing many people expect is freedom. What often arrives first is grief, but not the clean kind that comes with a funeral. It is ambiguous grief, the kind that has no socially accepted script. You are not only mourning the parent you have, you are mourning the parent you needed and kept hoping might still exist. You grieve the fantasy of repair, the version of the relationship that almost showed up on the good days. And because the parent is still alive, your mind can keep reaching for loopholes. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should try again. Maybe this time will be different. That tug is not weakness. It is attachment, still trying to complete the story. At the same time, many people notice something that feels confusing at first. Their body starts to change. Sleep gets deeper. The jaw unclenches. The stomach stops bracing. The constant background noise of anticipating the next call, the next critique, the next guilt message begins to fade. This is not because you stopped caring. It is because your nervous system finally exits a chronic threat loop. When chaos was your version of home, peace can feel unfamiliar, even suspicious. Some people describe it as emptiness, because for years their identity was organized around managing someone else. Without that role, you can feel temporarily unmoored, like you do not know who you are when you are not performing. This is where healing becomes less about proving your decision and more about rebuilding your internal home. Reparenting is not a trendy phrase here. It is a practical, psychological process. You learn to offer yourself what was missing: protection, validation, consistency, and permission to have needs without punishment. You begin practicing boundaries that do not require an emergency to be real. You start choosing relationships based on reciprocity rather than familiarity. And slowly, identity returns. Preferences come back online. Anger becomes information instead of danger. Joy stops feeling like something you have to earn. No contact does not erase the pain. It organizes it. It turns a scattered, daily injury into a wound that can finally close. It is not the end of longing. It is the beginning of safety, which is often the first condition required for real growth. And this is why no contact is so often misunderstood. From the outside, it can be framed as punishment, ingratitude, a culture war about kids these days. But psychologically, it is usually a last boundary, not a first weapon. It happens when a person has gathered enough evidence that closeness requires self-erasure and that continuing contact keeps their nervous system trapped in fear, obligation, and guilt. When people say, "But they're your parents," what they often mean is, "Endure what I would not endure," so the story of family stays intact. Yet adulthood is not measured by how much pain you can normalize. It is measured by whether you can protect your mind, your body, and your future. You can honor where you came from without letting it keep injuring you, and you can grieve them without returning to harm. If you have chosen distance, it does not mean you are heartless. It means you stopped confusing loyalty with self-sacrifice. And if you are still debating it, know this: you are not alone, and you are not crazy for needing safety. The goal is not to hate your family. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself. Peace is not betrayal. Sometimes it is the most honest form of survival.